The room was silent, except for the sound of Tamar's soft sobs echoing off the walls. It wasn't the kind of crying the public sees on stage or in interviews. It was raw, unfiltered, and heavy with betrayal. Her hands trembled as she clutched the papers in front of her, each sheet stained with tears and disbelief. The numbers, the words, the medical reports, they weren't supposed to be public. Not like this. Not ever. Then came the revelation. Toni had leaked them. Not as a warning, not as a concern, but as a weapon. The audience didn't know the full story, but Tamar did. Every detail of her private life had been exposed, splashed across social media before she could even breathe. The shock wasn't just about exposure, it was about trust. Toni wasn't just a friend. She was family. Someone Tamar had confided in. Someone she thought understood the delicate boundaries of privacy. And now, in a single act, those boundaries were shattered. The public reaction was instantaneous. Screenshots of the reports were shared, debated, and dissected. Fans rushed to social media, some offering support, others speculating, and a few cruelly mocking the situation. The story spread faster than any other scandal. Headlines screamed, comments flooded in, and whispers grew into a storm of gossip that seemed impossible to escape. But beneath the headlines, a more complicated story was unfolding. Tamar's emotional pain wasn't just about betrayal. It was about the implications, the fear, the uncertainty of a world suddenly aware of something so intimate and personal. It wasn't just a health crisis. It was a life being analyzed and judged by strangers, friends, and family alike. And in the midst of it all, the question lingered. Why? Why would Toni do this? Was it malice, carelessness, or a deeper conflict that no one yet understood? Tamar's tears were more than sadness. They were confusion, shock, and the weight of betrayal from someone she never thought could harm her in this way. As the camera pans, capturing her breaking face, the room itself seemed to tighten around her. The whispers outside were louder than any sound, and the moment crystallized in the collective consciousness of the audience. This wasn't just news. It was an emotional earthquake, shaking relationships, reputations, and hearts. Because when private pain becomes public spectacle, nothing is ever the same again. And Tamar's life, her trust, and her peace would never recover in the same way. Long before the leaked reports, Tamar Braxton had navigated a world that demanded perfection, loyalty, and control. Fame wasn't just a stage, it was a battlefield, one where every move was scrutinized, every word dissected, and every relationship tested. Tamar learned early that vulnerability could be exploited. And yet, she trusted people. She confided in friends, family, and colleagues, believing that trust could shield her from the harsh glare of public life. Toni, her sister, had always been part of that inner circle. Their bond was layered with love, rivalry, and shared history. Childhood memories, family events, and even professional collaborations formed a foundation that Tamar thought was unbreakable. But in this world, even family could become a source of exposure. Fame distorts boundaries. It amplifies the smallest disputes, and it transforms care into competition. Tamar's career was defined by highs and lows, victories and setbacks. Each song, each performance, each interview carried personal stakes. But behind the spotlight, her life was complicated. She had fought battles no one could see, health struggles, private fears, and the constant weight of expectations. Every smile was calculated. Every appearance was a shield. And yet, no amount of preparation could prevent betrayal from the one person she considered closest. The leak didn't happen in a vacuum. Years of tension, unspoken grievances, and misunderstandings had quietly built a foundation for conflict. Tamar had always been protective of her personal life, especially anything involving health, relationships, or vulnerabilities. But Toni's decision to share the reports, regardless of her intention, represented the ultimate fracture of that protection. Emotionally, Tamar's response was complex. There was shock, a sudden, visceral reaction to seeing something so intimate displayed publicly. There was fear of judgment, of public scrutiny, and of the long-term consequences for her career and relationships. There was sadness, a deep, lingering ache that came from realizing someone she trusted could wield her privacy as power. And there was anger, not explosive, but simmering, slow-burning, and directed both outward and inward. Outward, at Toni and the public for witnessing the exposure. Inward, at herself for allowing trust to become a vulnerability. Even before the leak, Tamar had struggled with the precarious balance of public persona and private reality. Fame demanded transparency, but humanity demanded privacy. Navigating that balance was exhausting. Every decision had layers of consequence. Every misstep could become a headline. And when the leak happened, that delicate equilibrium collapsed completely. Friends and colleagues reacted in various ways. Some reached out privately, offering support and reassurance. Others kept their distance, unsure how to navigate the fallout. Social media amplified every reaction. Every sympathetic post, every speculative comment, every viral meme became part of the emotional landscape Tamar now had to traverse. The scrutiny wasn't just public. It felt personal, intrusive, and relentless. Behind the headlines, Tamar reflected on the complex dynamics of trust and family. The relationship with Toni had been complicated for years. Rivalries, disagreements, and professional competition had coexisted with love and shared history. But in a world dominated by perception, appearances, and influence, even small fractures could be amplified into crises. And the leak was not just a fracture, it was a rupture. This was a moment where Tamar's emotional history collided with public reality. Past decisions, patterns of trust, and familial loyalty suddenly intersected with exposure, speculation, and judgment. The impact was immediate and profound. She cried, yes, but her tears carried the weight of decades of experience, love, fear, and resilience. Each sob reflected a life lived under scrutiny, a career built on vulnerability, and a trust that had been broken in front of the world. As the narrative unfolded, it became clear that this wasn't only about health reports. It was about power, influence, and the fragility of trust. It was about how fame transforms relationships into high-stakes games, where even those closest can become players in battles they never intended to join. And for Tamar, the emotional history of her life had prepared her for many things, but not for this raw, unfiltered betrayal, displayed for millions to witness. By the end of this backstory, the stage was set. Tamar's emotional history, familial bonds, and professional experiences converged into a perfect storm. The leak wasn't just a moment, it was a catalyst, a trigger that would push the narrative into conflict, escalation, and shocking revelations. And as the audience absorbed the magnitude of the betrayal, one thing was certain: the coming conflict would test loyalties, reveal hidden truths, and change lives forever. The moment the leak became public, everything shifted. Tamar's private world collided with the glaring reality of the public eye. Headlines screamed, social media erupted, and the story spread like wildfire, touching lives Tamar didn't even know were watching. The conflict wasn't just about the leaked reports, it was about trust, betrayal, and the emotional consequences that followed. At first, reactions were mixed. Fans flooded Twitter with support, sending heartfelt messages, gifs, and videos encouraging Tamar to stay strong. But alongside the support came speculation, criticism, and judgment. Comment sections became battlegrounds, some defending her, some questioning her choices, and some weaponizing the information to spread rumors. It wasn't enough to grieve privately. The world was now an audience to her heartbreak. Then came the first twist, a revelation that would shock even her closest allies. A journalist leaked that Toni had not acted alone. According to sources, the leak was part of a larger pattern of manipulation and control, aimed at exposing vulnerabilities to shape public perception. Tamar realized that this was not just a personal betrayal, it was a calculated move, executed to manipulate narratives around her career and her personal life. The betrayal cut deeper because it wasn't just about the reports themselves. It was about the method, the timing, and the intention behind them. Toni's actions, intentional or not, shattered the foundation of trust Tamar had built over decades. Every conversation, every private exchange, every moment of confidence now carried the shadow of doubt. Tamar found herself questioning not only her sister, but also everyone in her inner circle. Could anyone be trusted? Or had the leak revealed a system of control she had never fully understood? The emotional intensity escalated as Tamar confronted the implications. The reports, once private, were now used as tools in a public spectacle. Interviews, talk shows, and online forums dissected her life in real time. Every move she made was analyzed, every word she said was interpreted through the lens of the leak, and every gesture became fodder for discussion. Her emotional privacy had been stripped away, leaving raw vulnerability exposed to millions. Amid this chaos, Tamar's support system fractured. Friends who had once been allies hesitated to reach out, unsure if their presence would make matters worse. Colleagues became cautious, choosing words carefully to avoid any association with the controversy. Even family members distanced themselves, navigating the tension between loyalty and public perception. The emotional fallout was not isolated. It rippled across every relationship, challenging bonds Tamar had assumed were unbreakable. And just when it seemed like the betrayal couldn't deepen further, the first shocking twist landed. Reports surfaced suggesting that Toni may have been influenced by external forces, management, media insiders, or even competitors seeking to destabilize Tamar's career. This revelation reframed the narrative entirely. What had initially seemed like a personal dispute was now part of a larger, calculated attempt to control her story and her image. The twist was devastating. Tamar realized that she was caught in a web of power, influence, and manipulation. Her sister's actions were just one thread in a much larger tapestry, woven to maximize exposure and control the outcome of public opinion. The personal and the professional collided in ways Tamar had never anticipated, forcing her to navigate both heartbreak and strategic survival simultaneously. Tamar's emotional response was layered and complex. There was grief for the betrayal, fear of ongoing exposure, anger at the manipulation, and confusion about who could be trusted. Each tear she shed carried a weight beyond the immediate pain. It was the cumulative burden of years navigating fame, family, and trust in an industry where loyalty is conditional and privacy is fleeting. By the end of the first twist, Tamar understood that the conflict was no longer about the leaked reports alone. It was about power, influence, control, and the realization that she was navigating a battlefield that extended far beyond the personal betrayal to touch every aspect of her public life. The audience watching this unfold felt the tension in real time. They weren't just observers, they were participants, interpreting, judging, and debating every revelation. And in that participation, the stakes grew higher. Every action Tamar took could be scrutinized, every response could be interpreted as guilt or innocence, and every silence could be seen as complicity. The first twist set the stage for escalation. The conflict was no longer isolated. It was systemic. The emotional stakes were higher than ever, and the path forward was uncertain. Tamar faced not only personal betrayal, but also the challenge of navigating a world that seemed determined to expose her at every turn. And just when the audience thought they understood the scope of the drama, hints of a second, even more shocking twist began to emerge. Messages, cryptic posts, and subtle leaks suggested that there were still hidden forces at play, forces that had orchestrated much of the chaos from behind the scenes. Tamar's world, already upended, was about to be challenged in ways no one could have predicted. The first major twist concluded with a chilling realization. The leak wasn't just about betrayal, it was about control. Tamar was no longer simply a victim of circumstance. She was at the center of a story orchestrated to test loyalty, manipulate perception, and expose vulnerabilities. And as the drama intensified, one truth became painfully clear. Nothing in her life, or career, would ever be the same again. Once the first shock of the leak settled, the story didn't slow down. It multiplied. Social media, always hungry for drama, became a relentless echo chamber. Clips of Tamar crying, screenshots of Toni's posts, and fan reactions flooded timelines. Every word, Every gesture, every emotional display was dissected. What had started as private heartbreak became public obsession. The escalation wasn't just in volume, it was in intensity. Fans began debating who was right, who was wrong, and who had been manipulated. Influencers and commentators joined the conversation, spreading theories about why Toni leaked the reports. Some suggested jealousy. Others hinted at calculated sabotage. No matter the explanation, the fallout created a storm Tamar couldn't escape. Then a new twist arrived, one that shattered assumptions. Evidence began circulating suggesting that the leak was orchestrated by more than Toni. Certain sources hinted at industry insiders, rival personalities, or media strategists who stood to gain from Tamar's vulnerability becoming public. Suddenly, the story wasn't just about a sister's betrayal. It was about power, influence, and manipulation that extended far beyond personal grievances. This revelation changed the stakes entirely. Tamar's response was no longer just emotional, it was strategic. She had to navigate a world where even private interactions could be weaponized, where every decision could be interpreted in multiple ways. Friends who had once been confidants now approached cautiously, unsure whether offering advice might make them complicit. Colleagues and collaborators began altering their behavior, creating a network of tension that Tamar had to manage alongside her own grief. Public perception also shifted dramatically. The initial sympathy many felt for Tamar began to mix with doubt, speculation, and judgment. Audiences questioned whether she had been careless, or worse, complicit. Every interview, social media post, or public appearance was analyzed for inconsistencies. Tamar's vulnerability, once private, became a lens through which the world evaluated her character. Then came the second major twist, the revelation that turned the story upside down. Hidden messages, leaked screenshots, and cryptic statements suggested that Toni herself may have been manipulated. That's right. The person the public initially blamed could have been a pawn in a larger scheme designed to expose Tamar and manipulate the narrative. This reframing forced the audience to reconsider their assumptions. Was Toni truly the villain, or was she a participant in a far more complex plan? The emotional impact on Tamar was enormous. Not only had her trust been violated, but now the lines between friend, foe, and manipulator were blurred beyond recognition. The world she thought she understood, the one where loyalty, family, and trust were predictable, suddenly felt dangerous and uncertain. Every relationship became a potential liability. Every decision, a potential trap. Escalation also reached the level of public speculation about long-term consequences. Social media debates considered everything from Tamar's career trajectory to personal safety, from emotional well-being to financial stability. Fans, commentators, and insiders alike speculated about the motives behind the leak, the potential beneficiaries, and the unseen forces operating behind the scenes. The second major twist crystallized a terrifying truth. Tamar's situation was not merely personal, it was systemic. The leak, orchestrated by a combination of personal betrayal and external manipulation, revealed the fragility of control in the public eye. Fame, influence, and relationships were all part of a delicate ecosystem where one misstep could have far-reaching consequences. By the end of this escalation, Tamar had realized the full scope of the situation. She was no longer facing a single act of betrayal. She was facing a network of forces designed to test her resilience, manipulate her image, and control the narrative. Every tear she shed, every statement she made, and every private conversation had the potential to be weaponized. The cliffhanger of this part was clear. The story was far from over. Hidden agendas remained undiscovered. Manipulators remained in the shadows. And as Tamar prepared to respond, the audience understood one truth. The next revelation would be bigger, more personal, and potentially even more devastating. The second twist didn't just escalate the drama, it rewrote the rules. It forced everyone watching to question assumptions, challenge loyalties, and anticipate the unknown. And for Tamar, it meant that survival was no longer simply about emotion. It was about strategy, resilience, and the ability to navigate a world that had suddenly turned hostile. The audience was left with a single, haunting question. If those closest to her could be manipulated, who could she truly trust? And if the system behind the leak remained hidden, what was still to? The leak had unleashed a storm, and the public fallout was relentless. Social media was ablaze. Every platform, from Twitter threads to Instagram stories, buzzed with discussions about Tamar, Toni, and the now exposed private reports. Supporters rallied, critics speculated, and the curious dissected every detail. The emotional intensity wasn't confined to Tamar's circle. It spread like wildfire, reaching fans, colleagues, and even casual observers. Every action Tamar took was scrutinized. Interviews were dissected for tone, pauses, and word choice. Social media posts were analyzed for hidden meaning or subtle signs of guilt or distress. Every gesture became a clue, and every moment of silence was interpreted as complicity or confession. Even her closest friends, unsure how to act without fueling speculation, approached with caution. The line between ally and observer had blurred completely. Fans debated fiercely. Some condemned Toni as a cruel betrayer. Others questioned Tamar's choices, wondering why private information had been allowed to exist in a form that could be leaked. Rumors spread faster than verified reports, fueling speculation about hidden motives, secret disputes, and long-standing rivalries. Each viral clip, screenshot, or comment magnified the emotional intensity. Industry insiders watched closely. Management teams, collaborators, and publicists reassessed their strategies, worried that any misstep could lead to professional or reputational damage. Even those uninvolved felt the ripple effects, recognizing that trust, loyalty, and perception had become volatile commodities. The fallout reached far beyond Tamar's immediate circle. It was reshaping the emotional and professional landscape of everyone connected to her. Within Tamar herself, the emotional strain was immense. She felt grief, not just for the betrayal, but for the irreversible exposure of something deeply personal. Anger simmered beneath her sorrow, directed at Toni, at those who encouraged the leak, and at the cruel public curiosity that made her suffering a spectacle. Fear also loomed, not only about judgment, but about what the exposure could mean for her future, her career, and her relationships. Family dynamics became tense. Conversations that once felt safe turned into calculated exchanges. Every word had weight. Every expression could be interpreted incorrectly. Even the act of being together felt precarious, as if the air itself carried scrutiny. Tamar realized that the breach of trust had changed more than her public image. It had altered the way she related to those she once relied upon. The emotional fallout extended to fans as well. Many felt powerless, watching Tamar endure humiliation and heartbreak. Some channeled their empathy into support, flooding social media with messages of encouragement. Others, however, allowed curiosity or judgment to dominate, turning personal tragedy into a topic for debate and entertainment. The line between concern and exploitation blurred, mirroring the betrayal Tamar felt from someone she loved. By the end of the stage, the story had transformed. The leak was no longer a single event. It had become a phenomenon, a catalyst for emotional upheaval that affected everyone involved. The public wasn't just observing. It was participating, shaping the narrative, and amplifying consequences. Tamar's private pain had entered the collective consciousness, creating ripples that would be felt for months, if not years. And yet, amid the chaos, one unsettling realization emerged. The fallout wasn't just emotional. It was strategic. Those who orchestrated or benefited from the leak had achieved their goal. By turning Tamar's vulnerability into a spectacle, they controlled perception, influence, and narrative. The betrayal had succeeded far beyond personal impact. It had reshaped power dynamics, trust, and relationships. The public and emotional fallout set the stage for the next phase of the story, a confrontation with the hidden forces behind the leak, the revelation of deeper manipulations, and the looming threat that Tamar's life and career were far from secure. The audience was left with tension, empathy, and fear. Tamar had survived the exposure, but the journey was far from over. The emotional and public consequences would ripple into the next shocking twist, leaving everyone on edge. Just when the storm of public scrutiny seemed unbearable, the final twist hit like a lightning strike. Tamar had weathered betrayal, leaks, and emotional chaos, but she was about to discover that the truth was far more complicated than anyone had imagined. The person she believed was responsible, the actions she thought were deliberate, and even the narrative she had been following, all of it was only part of a much larger, hidden story. Evidence began surfacing in whispers. Screenshots, cryptic messages, and private conversations suggested that Toni, too, had been manipulated. The leak of Tamar's health reports was not just personal betrayal, it was part of a broader scheme to destabilize, to control, and to manipulate public perception. Someone, or some group, had orchestrated events in the shadows, using even Tamar's closest ally as a pawn. The revelation was devastating. Tamar realized that the people she trusted most, those she had believed would protect her, might not have been fully in control of their actions. Every interaction, every confession, every moment of apparent honesty could have been influenced, subtly shaped to serve a hidden agenda. Her world, already shaken, was now layered with deception at every level. The emotional intensity escalated as Tamar confronted this chilling truth. Tears returned, but now they carried not only grief and anger, they carried shock and disbelief. Could she even recognize loyalty anymore? Was every friend, every confidant, and every family member trustworthy, or merely a part of a carefully orchestrated game she had never agreed to play? And then came the cliffhanger. Hints that the forces behind the leak were still active, still observing, still controlling outcomes. Anonymous messages began appearing on social media, cryptic and threatening. One read, "You thought it was over. You're only seeing the beginning." Another warned, "The next revelation will change everything you know about loyalty and trust." Tamar's audience, already invested in her story, was left in suspense. This was no longer just about personal pain or family betrayal. It was about survival, perception, and navigating a world where nothing was as it seemed. The monster, the hidden system manipulating events, was still out there, and it was patient, precise, and relentless. The final twist revealed a horrifying truth. The leak had been only the first move. Tamar's vulnerability had been measured, her reactions observed, and her network of relationships analyzed. Everything publicized, every rumor, and every reaction was part of a design she hadn't even understood until now. And in that moment, the cliffhanger solidified. No one was safe from manipulation. No one could be fully trusted. Tamar's next steps would determine not only her personal survival, but also the integrity of every bond she had relied upon. And as the audience waited for what would happen next, the question hung in the air, heavy with suspense and dread. Who is truly in control? And who will be the next target? The story had escalated beyond personal betrayal into a psychological battlefield, where loyalty, perception, and truth were weapons. Tamar had survived the first waves, but the next revelation could change everything. The screen fades to black, leaving viewers desperate for answers, hearts racing, and minds spinning with speculation. Now, the story isn't just Tamar's, it's yours. Every comment you leave, every theory you share, every reaction you have becomes part of the conversation surrounding this shocking betrayal and its hidden forces. The leak wasn't only a private tragedy, it was a public phenomenon, and your voice matters in shaping how the narrative unfolds. Think about it. If someone so close could be manipulated, if trust could be weaponized, what would you do in Tamar's place? Would you confront the betrayal, rebuild relationships, or protect yourself at all costs? And more importantly, how do you navigate a world where the people you rely on may not truly be free from influence? We want to hear your thoughts. Share your theories in the comments. Who do you think orchestrated the leak? Was Toni a pawn or a villain? How far do you think the manipulation goes? And who could be next? Your insights, predictions, and discussions are what make the story alive, and they could even hint at what comes next. Subscribe now and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapter. This isn't the end, it's only the beginning. The monster, the hidden system manipulating events, is still out there, and the next revelation could shock everyone. Share this video with friends, debate your theories, and stay engaged because the stakes are higher than ever. Remember, the scariest betrayals aren't always obvious. Sometimes, the ones closest to you are caught in a web you can't see. Don't look away. Don't blink. Stay alert, stay curious, and get ready for the next explosive twist in Tamar Braxton's story.